Welcome to the Buffalo Kickoff Live Podcast. I'm Josh Reed alongside Thad Brown, as always. And today our special guest is Jeremy White, WGR 550. Jeremy, how's everything been? I know life is, you're living life in the fast lane at this point, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's busy. Daylight savings kind of threw our house for a little bit of a loop. Not that it was, I don't think it's been all that bad. It's just that everything moved an hour. Everything moved an hour with the babies. We can just adjust our clocks, but they don't exactly get that concept yet.
Everything else is good. I mean, we're in the midst of Bills season and, much like that and myself, running and gunning and everything. The Bills, I guess initial thoughts on everything that went down in Jacksonville. What was your number one takeaway?
It's funny. I was just thinking earlier today that the Jack Eichel trade and the Bills losing to Jacksonville happened in the course of 3 days. Those are two big stories. Both of them are kind of like, whoa, wait a minute. Let me try to get my head on straight. The Jacksonville loss, it's so bad that it's almost like, sometimes you say burn the tape. I think Pittsburgh is a burn the tape kind of loss. This is more of a, wait, I didn't even know you guys had that in you kind of game. And, is it a one-off? Is it a sign of things to come? We'd had our questions about their offense for a couple weeks. And I'm not saying that it's good that they lost and that it'll be better for them. But if they had won and gotten away with it again, anybody that would have had concerns would have been kind of mocked a little bit. Like, oh, yeah, you've been complaining a lot. And instead, they finally didn't get away with it.
It's funny, too, because Josh Allen is the guy who always, I don't say always, but who has played that way where he gets away with stuff. He's always been, his style has been, I'm going to play hero ball. I'm going to be the guy throwing it halfway down. And it works because he's that talented and has that big an arm and is that good an athlete. In this game, it didn't. Like you said, he didn't get away with it. It's the first time I can really remember the Bills, outside of maybe the Houston playoff game, having a situation where, Josh Allen could not hero play his way around whatever other issues were going on. And, I don't know if that speaks to, like you said, I don't know what to make of it either. But it is unusual in that this is not a situation that you would think that Josh Allen, before the game, I don't care who's around and what's happening, Josh Allen would be good enough by himself to beat the Jags. And that was not the case. And I think that forces us to kind of reevaluate where this team is as a whole now, through 8 weeks.
I also think the context of the Chiefs struggling helps here because we're seeing another world offense all of a sudden have these problems. Theirs are a little different. Theirs are with turnovers. The Bills have been with red zone. But to see Mahomes and the Chiefs have the same sort of struggles, there's this conversation in football where all of a sudden these big play quarterbacks are being forced to play without those big plays. So it's not just happening to the Bills. It's kind of like a league-wide story.
And it is curious. I was thinking about this today. Like, what offense do you fear right now? Not that there aren't any, but Matt Stafford and the Rams has been good, but not dominating. And they got owned by Tennessee last weekend. Tom Brady and the Bucs. Look, it's Tom Brady. And that might be the only one that I look at. I'm going to walk into a game and think, wow, this is just an offense that's going to overwhelm everybody they play. Beyond that, Justin Herbert's still growing. Joe Burrow's still growing.
I would have thrown the Titans. I would have thrown the Titans in the mix
but they don't have
if Derrick Henry doesn't go down. I would have put them, especially after what we've seen them do the last couple of weeks. I would have I'm with you. I don't know that there's any surefire offense. Now, things have a way of playing them out. Guys, the one thing that I still am a little surprised that we heard after the game was Micah Hyde just flat out saying that they weren't ready. That's the one thing that I never thought we would get following a game from a team coached by Sean McDermott was someone readily saying, we weren't ready. And I don't think, to me, the way I interpreted that, and I don't know if you guys thought the same, I don't think he meant X's and O's wise. To me, I thought he was referring to plugged in, the way they should be plugged in. And then we heard, comments coming out of the Jags locker room saying that they looked across the field at the Bills sideline and just kind of saw guys walking around kind of lethargic, if you will.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people had asked the question, how do they stay sharp with so many soft opponents in a row? And it's not even to say that they look ahead in the schedule, but that Chiefs game is obviously a very emotional game. There's going to be a little bit of a come down from that. But the next game is Monday Night Football, so there's that big focus. Then it's your rival, the Miami Dolphins. You don't like each other. A little letdown here, I guess, that can happen from time to time. staying sharp and as sharp as they've been through the whole season, you'd like them to, but you kind of also have to acknowledge the goal is not to be, sharp for the most weeks. It's to be the sharpest in about 5 or 6 of them at the end of the season. So, I guess you expect ups and downs. It's just surprising that it could really look that bad. And for them to not be ready, whether that's the offensive line not being ready, the game plan just kind of being, just thrown out there like this should work instead of really digging in. I don't know, because for Micah Hyde to say that is definitely a big deal. He's a team leader. And he also says it from the defense, who most definitely was ready. I mean, the defense I don't know if they played with emotion. They got hit with a bunch of personal fouls, which is usually an over emotional thing to do. So, I'm kind of stuck on saying you didn't have enough emotion because I think one side of the ball definitely did.
Yeah, it's a good point about the defense. And although I've pointed out a couple of times that, the defense got away with a drop touchdown in the end zone, which would have been 7 more points. Dane Jackson gets lit up. That could have been a touchdown. So it could have easily gone a little bit worse for the defense, but you can't argue with 9 points allowed. And like you said, the personal fouls indicated a team that was not playing without emotion, at least on that side of the ball. But to me, the thing that was more surprising wasn't what Micah Hyde said on Sunday. It's what Sean McDermott said on Monday, which is we got to figure out who our energy guys are. I mean, this isn't a brand new young team. They're not throwing guys in, for the first time. This is a group that they should know who their energy guys are. And more to the point, those guys should know they have that responsibility to keep this up with the rest of the squad. I mean, it shouldn't be a situation of, well, who's going to lift this up? It's the same guys that's been doing it for the last year and a half, 2 years. So that to me was the bigger surprise. And, McDermott's been really, really good at not losing dumb games to dumb teams. 19-3 against non-playoff teams the 2 years before this season. This was just a non-Bills, non-Sean McDermott game. Maybe not so much on defense, like you said, Jeremy, but otherwise in this contest, not being able to find a way to win it at the end. And
you might say it's a little bit of hubris, like rolling Tommy Sweeney in as next man up for Dawson Knox. Like I know that a lot of people like Tommy Sweeney. He's got good hands. He's a good story. He's definitely a good player. But every time I saw him out wide, like not on the line, I thought like this isn't Jimmy Graham. Like what, can you just roll anybody out there? I don't think you can. And I'm wondering why it's not Gabriel Davis instead, or why they're not bringing 2 tight ends to try and max protect or even keep. Oftentimes they would have Sweeney and Singletary in the backfield and they would always leak out instead of staying in protect. So like the whole thing kind of looked like, watching a second time, watching all the formations, it just did not look like a characteristic Bills game where they're generally very prepared.
Jeremy, to your point too, the Bills ran 11 personnel for every snap but one in that game, except for the last drive. So they had Sweeney on the field every snap. And I mean, I get running through the first half. All right, you go to the locker room, maybe talk about it, or some point in the third quarter, you make an adjustment. To not go away from that at any point when it clearly was not working. Now, at the last drive of the game, they went 4 wide the whole way through, except for 4th and 16, where they go back to 11 personnel and put Sweeney back on the field. It was, I don't want to say it wasn't creative. I'm assuming there was some thought behind that strategy. But this is a team that, even though they like being in 11 personnel most of the time, they do vary it up. They'll run 4 wide. They'll run 2 tight end. They'll run 2 running back. They've done it all year long. But not in this game, not in the one game where nothing seemed to be working. Why not try something different long before you got to 2 minutes to go and having a field goal or having to get a field goal to tie the game?
Yeah. Do you think now, big picture, is this a game that we're going to look back at likely and just go, it is what it is? I mean, you look back to last year, they lost 2 games in a row. Granted, it was to the Chiefs and Titans, but then keep in mind that the next game was the Jets game that Bass kicked 6 field goals. Remember? And we were all going, oh, their offense is done. It's flushed. They just get rid of it. Start over again. You can't do anything. Tyler Bass has got to win your games against the Jets. And then they figure things out and things were just fine. Do you think that this is going to be one of those games that even in a month from now, you look back and go, how did that even happen? That was just such a fluke.
I think it might come down to how tough the defensive line matchups are. I mean, the interior of this offensive line, we know it to be a problem. And with matchups against the Bucs, like that's a nightmare. We could talk about Brady being a nightmare, but the Bucs defensive line, Vita Vea, I mean, I'd be scared. The Saints have a really strong front 7 and a really good defense. And you've got a game against them. The Colts have a really good defense. So it wouldn't surprise me if the offense comes back to earth, and instead of being the number 1 unit in the AFC, we can talk about it as a top 5 AFC offense that we know is dangerous. But, the days of rolling out and thinking they're going to hang 35, I mean, they might not have the horses to do that anymore because of their line issues, because they didn't upgrade the running back position, because they didn't get that game-breaking speed element that a lot of us talked about in the offseason. Like, shouldn't there be one more flash piece here? And Knox has definitely emerged to be one of those flash pieces. So if he comes back, that'll help. But I don't know. I'll admit that, like, my confidence is a little bit shaken and just thinking they're going to hang 35 points every single week.
Something real quick for both of you guys. So I had somebody on Twitter ask me, if this loss to the Jags comes the week before the trade deadline, do the Bills make a move? And I went, that's a really good question, because I would say the answer is yes. I would say that people were already pounding the desk that they should do something. And that was coming off of a win against the Dolphins. And I mean, what are your thoughts? If this loss comes 1 week ago before the trade deadline, are we looking at the same roster?
I think there's certainly more of a motivation to make a move. I think Brandon Beane, not that he didn't try, is working harder at it, because as Jeremy pointed out, the interior of the offensive line was already a question mark. And now this Jacksonville game pretty much says their depth is almost useless. The way that game went down, I don't know how you can trust, especially Cody Ford, but even Ike Butker, to go back in there in a big spot the rest of the year. So if I was Brandon Beane, I would feel like I would have to make a move, even if I'm overpaying a couple rounds on a draft pick, to get somebody that I can plug in at guard and feel like I'm not, making Josh Allen run for his life every game. So yeah, I think it would have made a difference for sure.
I wonder. I mean, I wonder about the deadline. I like to talk about moves that they don't make, moves that they're in on. I mean, they were reportedly in on Von Miller. So, they're looking at that. If they had brought Miller in, would they have sent Mario Addison out? Would somebody else have left? Then there's would you do it over again in the offseason? Would they have wanted to try and make another pick on the offensive line? Spencer Brown in the 3rd round, of course, has already paid dividends. Do you already wish you could have that 2nd round pick back on Boogie Basham? Not to say that he's a bust, but just you look at your roster and think, well, we're pretty flush at defensive end, so much so that we had to trade one. And on the offensive line, they are not flush at that position. And I mean, hindsight's 20/20, but here on, in November, it's, might have wanted that one back in April in that 2nd round.
Well, that's part of what made this loss shocking for me, is that, I've never been a Cody Ford fan, but the guy's been at least competent in the league for almost 2 years when he's been healthy. Ike Butker last year, for the last 7-8 games, was at least competent. And those two guys together in this game against Jacksonville were not anywhere close to that. I mean, Darrell Williams kind of regressing a little bit as a part of the offensive line issue too. But, you go back to the summertime, I wouldn't have, if you had said to me the Bills are going to have a problem with offensive or defensive line, I would have put it on the defensive side with the guys that I've never seen play before, as opposed to Butker or Ford, two guys who I've seen play, and say, look, I'm not a huge fan of them. I don't want to start them, but as your 6th and 7th lineman, I'm totally fine with that. And I would have been, let's add on the defensive line. Let's trade for Von Miller if we can, instead of doing something more on the offensive line.
Jeremy, one of the things that we ask the guests every week, and we've gotten some pretty good feedback and interesting answers on this. What's been your maybe favorite storyline around the NFL? Not just the Bills specific, maybe not even your favorite, but one that you've followed maybe the closest and really has piqued your interest.
All right. Well, it's funny. I'm 2 things. One, I like the Rams. I appreciate the Rams for being the team that trades draft picks for players. I think it's smart. I think their model is sustainable. And I think it's good for football to have a number of different approaches, because anytime I bring up the Rams, someone will say, it's going to catch up with them. And I think, when? They haven't picked in the 1st round in 4 years. When does that catch up? After they win a Super Bowl, after they go to a Super Bowl? So I like the Rams because they're bold, they're a big market, and they go for it. And then the other team I like, a storyline, I like the Cowboys. And I'm sorry, but I like Dak Prescott. I like their offense. And I think part of the reason I like them so much is the Cowboys are very, in my similar to the Bills, in that they're driven by their offense. The Bills' defense is better, but the Cowboys are getting some playmakers over that side of the ball. They've got great weapons. They've got a quarterback who's fun to watch and leaves it all out there the same way that Allen does. So that might be subconsciously why I like the Cowboys. But the NFC is great. and I love watching the Rams, and I love watching the Cowboys. So I guess that's the best I've got for my favorite storyline this year.
Jeremy, one of the things
Matthew Stafford too. Stafford's the kind of guy, like, same, leaves it all out there, did it forever in Detroit, finally gets a chance. Like, I like rooting for him.
I enjoy the lease on life story with him for sure. It's almost like the guy's been reborn, given a chance, and it's fun to see what he can do with it for sure. Another thing we do every week is get a look at the team the Bills are playing next is the Jets this week. And look, not certainly in the realm of storylines that you brought up, but the quarterback the Jets have, at least the one we're probably going to see on Sunday, and Mike White, is becoming an interesting story in and of itself, almost for one part, because the Jets spent high resources on a quarterback that may not even be the best quarterback in his own team right this second. But, Mike White, a guy who's been in the league 3 years, hasn't done anything. All of a sudden he shows up and, drops 400 yards on the Bengals. What's been your take on the Jets maybe as a whole, but also at least the particular brand of Jets the Bills might face this weekend?
I think the Jets had a very unlucky preseason. Like, the Jets are supposed to be a team that's going to be, manage the ball on offense and be good on defense. They have had a ton of injuries to their defense. So that is a big wrench in the plan. The thing about Mike White and Zach Wilson, it makes me think about J.P. Lossman and Trent Edwards, where you draft a guy in the first round, you draft another guy in the third round, just in case. And now you get to a point, it's like, now he might be better. And if Mike White is better, then how long can you pretend that he's not? How long do you keep a guy that might win you games on the sideline for the development of Zach Wilson? So it's a lot like Miami, where is he hurt? Yeah, he's hurt. He's going to sit for another week, So maybe it ends up being Mike White that the Bills see. And I think I'd be a lot more nervous about Mike White than Zach Wilson.
The division looks awful interesting all of a sudden after last weekend. And, I think everybody after last year was ready to, ding dong, the witch is dead. But the Patriots now one game back in the loss column, Jeremy. And I don't know if it's time to smash the panic button, but I'm quite positive Bills fans are looking in that rearview mirror going, oh no, please, don't let this turn so quickly.
I will confess two things. One, during the early parts of the season, when it looked like the Bills were going to cruise, I said I would like it if somebody stayed close so we can be, let's get some drama in this season. I was being snobbish, as asking for a little bit of drama. Well, we've got it. So, but what that means is that the Monday night game, if they're one back, that game is added intensity. And I'm into that. I think that's great. The other thing on the Patriots is I was very wrong on one thing, but also right on another. I was wrong on Cam Newton. I thought Newton would come back and have a big bounce back year and lead them to the playoffs and have them be a tough out. Well, it turns out it's Mac Jones that looks like he's going to be the one that does that. But New England returning to what they were, not that big a surprise. They won 7 games last year with nothing on offense, got some players back on defense, signed some free agents, added weapons to the offense and tight ends, which Bill Belichick always uses really well. So I'm not that surprised. They've won 4 out of 5, and they've got good losses to Dallas and to Tampa. So I think both those games are tough. And, is a split a success for the Bills? You might argue that it is, because they look pretty good. And if they can hold down offenses like Dallas and Tampa, then I think they can hold down this Bills offense too.
And to that point, Jeremy, I mean, what's the threat level of the Patriots winning this division? Because even a month ago, I think we would put it at 1 out of 10. Right now, I mean, it's got to be 4, 5, 6. I mean, where would you land in terms of how nervous the Bills should legitimately be about being a second place team this year in the AFC East?
I want to answer after they play the Browns this week. Like, if they beat the Browns, that's keeping pace, a half a game back, and they got by a good opponent. And they'll play the Titans still, play the Bills twice. They've got the Falcons on their schedule before they play the Bills. So they've got some tough games, but I made a joke today. Second last game of the season for New England is Jacksonville. And what do we do? We're like, oh, wow, well, that's a cakewalk. I mean, Jacksonville took out the Bills. So you kind of never know. But one of their tougher games is this week. It's Cleveland. And, I mean, if you follow the Browns, they are up and down. And it in Cleveland, New England just sounds like the kind of game that the Browns score 6 points in and lose.
Oh, you're killing me over here. As a guy who grew up as a Browns fan, you're absolutely. They go out and hang 41 on the bench.
I know.
They're supposed to get smoked and then Hey, speaking of, the team that I grew up kind of, following and cheering for, being Cleveland, and looking back to when you were a kid, what were you a sports card collector? Were you that? Yeah. Was there, ironically, even though he wasn't a Cleveland sports player, my favorite, I was a baseball card guy. I did a little bit of football, but I was really into baseball cards. I just could not get enough Will Clark cards. Now, in hindsight, not a great investment. I mean, had a great swing, seemed like a good enough dude, but not a great. Him and Mark Grace were my two guys.
Yeah.
Both really good players. I'm not going to retire early from the money I make on either of those. Who were a couple of the guys you collected that you would not trade their cards no matter what?
Will Clark, one of the meanest looking guys in the world. He just looked mean all the time. I remember that about his career. I loved Darryl Strawberry growing up. Like, he was the guy that I loved to get as many cards of Darryl Strawberry as I could. Darryl Strawberry, Doc Gooden. I grew up a Mets fan. For the Giants, I grew up a Giants fan too. Lawrence Taylor, Phil Simms, like anything I could get my hands on with the Giants and the Mets were my two favorite teams.
Thad, you got any good ones left? Like mine are all shoved in a box. Like, I have no idea. I could be sitting on a gold mine. Do you guys have any really good ones?
I have one real quick. Have you seen Steve Tasker's Twitter profile picture?
Yes.
With the long flowing hair?
Sure.
That's from a card I had. So I opened up this album going through, and there's this illustrated Steve Tasker Pro Bowl card with that mane, and I took a picture of it and sent it to him like, hey, check this out. So if anyone watching that hasn't seen that, that's from a card that I have. They used to make cards like, they'd make people superheroes. They do all this crazy stuff. So the Steve Tasker his hair in all of its glory.
I had about a 5-year run with cards. So I still have like remember the big like cardboard boxes, sleeves, and you'd have like a stack of 100. I got like 4 of them at home. And a couple years ago, I was like, God, I got to have something in here that's worth something. I told my daughter about the whole deal, hey, it's a rare card, whatever. So she was totally into it. We got all the cards out. We looked through. I got nothing. I got like 8 Willie White Shoes Johnsons and like 5 Lance Mells, and that's about it. I have nothing that's worth anything. But I know exactly where the cards are, and every once in a while I'll get them out and flip through, and it's a fun time for sure. All right, Jeremy, we end this podcast every week with Thad's 3 things. It's one Bills thing, one NFL thing, one other thing. The Bills thing this week, obviously we talk a lot about the offense and the way it's been struggling the last couple of weeks. Is there one thing that you want to see, whether it's a change, maybe it's a guy coming back healthy? And I'm not sitting here to expect you to say, this is the greatest fix ever. We'll solve, it's just something that you might like to see them try the last half of the season that might, be able to have an impact and turn things around a little bit.
15 targets a game to Diggs.
My fantasy teams agreed. Yep.
15 targets a game. I mean, you need to up his production. He's always produced. He produced in Minnesota, but they didn't throw to him, which was why he wanted to leave. He came here. He produced. Just force the ball to Diggs. He's one of the best in the NFL at contested catches. Throw him jump balls, even against 2 people if you have to. I would be force feeding Diggs.
Josh?
Yeah, that's not a bad one. I want to know what's up with this running game. I mean, look, Moss isn't doing anything. Singletary isn't doing anything. At what point do you go to plan C, right? At what point do you try something different, someone different? I don't know that the holes are there no matter who is running the ball, but obviously Singletary and Moss aren't getting it done. And I'm not somebody that believes that you have to be, proficient in both running and passing in order to win games, but you have to do more than, 9 carries from the running backs for 20 yards or something. It was really bad. You've got to at least, when you run a play action, they have to at least go, oh, they may actually run the ball here, and not go, well, who cares if they run it? That guy's going 1 yard. It doesn't matter. At some point, we've talked to, Jeremy brought it up, that they're about to face some defensive lines that can get after the quarterback. Well, if Josh Allen is going to survive to get to the playoffs, they may need to find a way to run the ball, at least semi-effective.
Jets this week, by the way, are probably, I don't know statistically, but there certainly looks eye test, one of the worst run defenses in the league, and they actually can get after the quarterback. So that might be a big test for that right away this Sunday. The thing I want to see Josh Allen move a little bit in the pocket. I want to see rollouts. I want to see, sliding pockets. There hasn't been enough of that this year. The Bills did a lot of that in 19 and 20. And, you want to help your offensive line, run a play action boot where you've got everybody on the defensive line going right. And I'll tell you what, look, watching these games over again, you got week 10, third quarter, it's 20-10. You run a play action boot. The defensive and offensive lines, it's almost like a mutual agreement. We don't need to run on this play because we're not supposed to be a part of it anyway. Give Josh Allen some easy buckets. Give him some looks on the edge. And the thing about the concern about rolling out is that you take half of the field away. Well, Josh Allen's got enough of an arm that it might be only a third of the field or a quarter of the field. So, move him around, let him exploit some of that athleticism more than he has so far. The NFL thing, pretty simple question. We've danced around it a little bit. The Titans are now 7-2. 5 weeks ago, they were the first team to lose to the Jets and were a laughingstock. Now, they can go into LA and whomp the Rams without Derrick Henry, maybe the greatest running back of this decade. So quite simply, Josh, I'll start with you. How good and how feared should the Titans be?
I think they're good. I mean, we saw it against the Bills and we saw it again this past week, as you mentioned. I don't know if feared's the right word. If Derrick Henry were still there, I would say feared big time, because then we saw, you would talk about a team that can run play action pass. I mean, there it is. I mean, they fake a handoff to Derrick Henry, and A.J. Brown is just so good that they're able to make things happen. Derrick Henry's gone. I just don't know how long they're going to be able to hold this up. You saw it's not some small sample size that, we're not sure if they're really dependent on Derrick Henry. That team runs through Derrick Henry, and they may be able to sustain it a couple of weeks here and there. So I think they're good. I think they're going to make the playoffs. I just don't know that at the end of the day, they can go far without, an MVP candidate, Derrick Henry.
Jeremy?
I'm a little higher on the Titans. One thing happened. Baltimore lost a bunch of running backs and drafted a bunch of receivers, and they went from last year being the worst passing team in football for a yardage standpoint to this year being 8th, and I think they're better for it. The one thing that tends to happen, these teams that lose running backs need to pass it more. They get better. So I don't know if the Titans can do that, because I do like Ryan Tannehill, and if both A.J. Brown and Julio Jones stay healthy, that's a very dangerous 1-2 combo. And their schedule from here, the Rams was their toughest game. The fact that they got that one, they are set up to lose maybe 1 or 2 more games max. And I'm not so sure they'll need Derrick Henry to win those games. So I think they could be the 1 seed and still not be, the boogeyman that the Chiefs are when they're the 1 seed, or, like the Packers with Aaron Rodgers and 45 touchdowns. So it might be a funny year where you have a 1 seed that everyone looks at and thinks well, no one's going to be afraid to go to Tennessee. So I think they could still very well get the bye and then get bounced in the first round.
As a guy who has Julio Jones on his fantasy teams, good luck holding your breath with that guy being healthy. I mean, he has done nothing this season.
I'm with you, Jeremy. I think fear, like Josh said, fear's not the right word. No one's going to be afraid of Ryan Tannehill in the playoffs. No one's going to be, I don't even know if A.J. Brown is worth fearing at this point. But when it comes to trying to get the 1 seed, yeah, I'd be afraid of that, because Tennessee has got the schedule to roll right to it without really needing all their pieces. It's funny. I mean, we talked at the beginning of the year about how important it would be for the Bills to get that 1 seed. Now it might be about getting the 2 seed. You don't have to play Tennessee in that first round, and you just wait for whoever probably can and maybe will pick them off in that second round of the playoffs. Now you're home for the AFC Championship anyway. So, winning regular season games still could matter for the Bills.
And in that scenario, if they're the 2 seed, that would mean 5 consecutive January Sunday home games.
Yes.
5 in the same month.
And one after the other, no buys.
I know.
Fantastic. Yeah, you're right.
We'd be exhausted.
Yeah.
They should let us move in.
Well, as the one working in Rochester out of the 3 here, I would be up for that for sure. All right, last thing. Stunningly, the Manning cast curse lived through last weekend, where every active player who goes on as a guest loses their next game. The previous 5 guys, they all lost to good teams, not stunning losses. This, Josh Allen losing to the Jags, was, obviously a eye popper, blow your mind kind of loss. So I'll put it to you guys. How much do you guys believe in curses, and what was the big superstition, or what still is, the big superstition for you, and I'll go first on this one, give you guys a chance to think for a minute. I'm not a superstition guy. I'm probably like a 3, 1 out of 10, in terms of believing in them. But when I was a kid, I used to umpire baseball games all the time, like as a teenager, little league, whatever. And although it's fun to do and you make a little money, it's still a job. And the idea is it's, better to not have extra innings. So if I ever had a couple back-to-back half innings where it'd be like 5 pitches, 7 pitches, whatever ball was in play, that ball would stay in play the whole rest of the game. You guys know how it works for Little League, right? Kid falls off a ball, some kid who's not playing runs over and gets it. I would watch where that kid was. And the moment that ball came back into play, I'd be like, catch, let me see it. And he'd give me the other ball. And I don't care if that ball was glistening white, where you could eat off the thing, that ball's going to my pocket, and the quick ball is going back into the field. And it didn't matter. I didn't care, what anybody believed, how bad that ball looked. We were using that ball for the rest of the game. It didn't work all the time, but that was as hardcore superstition as I get. Jeremy, you want to go next?
Yeah, well, the first part of the question was,
how much do you buy into curses, whatever? All that
stuff?
Yeah,
not much, but I bet their future guests do. Yeah. I bet it gets harder because you're the quarterback, you're the receiver. You don't want to go back to your teammates and have to answer to that, they come calling for Mike White or Zach Wilson this week. They're gonna be like, I don't think so, guys. Well, let's let somebody else win a game first. So I don't put too much in that, but it does affect people that do. And for me, superstitious, not too much. Like, I guess you'd hold your breath driving by a cemetery sometimes. I would do that. That might be about I don't step on cracks. I wouldn't walk under a ladder. The obvious ones that you can just very easily avoid. I'll avoid those.
See, I will purposely walk under ladders now, just despite the whole idea that that's a real thing. The baseball thing I buy into, but man, black cats and all that stuff. No, I'm fine with all that. Josh?
Yeah, I'm Blutarski on this 0.0. Like I'm not really into the whole thing. And yes, I had a few people that hit me up that were like, hey, by the way, you pretty much brought up the whole Manning cast thing to Josh Allen, and then he winds up on it, and then they lose, and this is kind of your fault. And I'm like, stop it. I also brought up the fact that I literally, for Father's Day, I got a pair of socks, right, that were screen printed and had my son's face all over them. I wore them twice during Bills games, to the Jags and to the Titans. So does that mean I have to burn those socks now? I mean, I don't think so. I'm not a believer in superstitions, but to Jeremy's point, there are some players, and this, Dad, there are some players and coaches that are like, they have the same pregame meal. Like they need to take a 20-minute nap, and it's always, at a certain time before the game starts. And I mean, and that's all great, but I don't think I've ever really had a superstition that I can think of off the top of my head. So I'm not really on that.
Well, if the Bills they'll stop wearing those blue pants with the white tops. They're sub 500 in that getup.
That's interesting.
Yeah, how about that? Every other outfit, they're good. They lose more when they go white tops, blue pants. Tennessee, Jacksonville, the AFC Championship game. There's a couple like high profile blue pant losses. I think the Hail Murray. Yeah. White tops, blue pants.
How about the Browns game 2 years ago? I think that was the same thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, somebody keeps track of it.
And this is coming from Jeremy White. And I can tell you, when it comes to clothing, if you've seen this guy's attire on a golf course, you would know that he knows what he's talking about when it comes to the tops and bottoms and making sure that you're looking fresh and clean.
How many games have they lost since 2017? Because 10 of them are in the white top, blue pants.
Well, since 2017, they were
9 and 10
in that outfit. So 3 losses this year. 4 losses last year at 7, 5,
Ready?
6. Yeah, 13. 23? Go ahead.
Houston playoff game.
Yeah.
White tops, blue pants.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, if this is
stop wearing them.
Yeah, you're right.
How about the Jacksonville loss? Are all 3 of the McDermott playoff era losses white blue? I want to know what site you're looking at, by the way, too.
BuffaloRumblings.com had this whole thing laid out. Wild card 2017, yes. Jacksonville lost. Houston.
Wow.
So 3 postseason losses, all in that outfit.
Yeah, there's no way they wear those in the postseason this year, right? Like that will be that will be a subject brought up.
Oh, absolutely.
Like
100%.
That is something. In fact, on Wednesday, we speak to Sean McDermott and the players, and maybe this is something that needs to be addressed.
We're not bringing it up this week, Josh, because we will get stared daggers to where people will have holes in their back of their head coming from Sean McDermott if we ask him about uniform combinations being a factor.
Uniform combo. All right. Hey, Jeremy, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Thanks for listening and watching the Buffalo Kickoff Live Podcast.